This film is not a historical account of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, nor does it seek to project a chronological biography of the lives of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo mentioned, "It would be only myself who could speak of things in my past, giving them their true form and significance." He wrote to a disciple, "Neither you nor anyone else knows anything at all of my life. It has not been on the surface for men to see." Likewise, the mother said, "Do not ask questions about the details of the material existence of this body. They are in themselves of no interest and must not attract attention. Throughout all this life, knowingly or unknowingly, I have been what the Lord wanted me to be. I have done what the Lord wanted me to do. That alone matters." In deference to the wishes of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, this film is but a humble offering at their lotus feet, based on their notes, recollections, and some relevant documents. While providing glimpses of their lives, the film is essentially a tribute to the spiritual mission they embodied and the divinity with which they blessed the world.
The whole creation is the manifestation of the divine and has been created by him out of himself. It is his own self that he manifests in all that exists in the creation. The ultimate aim of creation is to awaken all beings to the consciousness of the divine. Earth is a kind of symbolic crystallization of universal life, a reduction, a concentration, so that the work of evolution may be easier to do and follow. The unfolding process of the self is the millennial march of Earth's evolution through matter, plant life, animal life, and man. But man is a transitional being, not the final end of the evolution and the crown of terrestrial existence. Beyond man awaits the formation of the divine race, the Superman. The Rig Veda rises out of the ancient dawn with the sound of 1,000-voiced hymn lifted from the soul of man to an all-creative truth and an all-illumining light.
Prithivyavata
In this ascendant movement of evolution, the divine consciousness takes a human birth and hastens the coming of the next evolutionary stage.
A strong son of lightning came down to the earth with 5 feet of swiftness splendid. Light was born in a womb, and thunder's force filled the human frame. The calm speed of heaven, the sweet greatness, pure passion, winged power had descended. All the gods in a mortal body dwelt, bore a single name. Sri Aurobindo was born in Calcutta in a luminous hour of 15th August, 1872.
Six years later, a miracle of the Absolute was born. Infinity put on a finite soul. All ocean lived within a wandering drop. A time-made body housed the illimitable. Mira Alfassa, later known as the Mother, was born in Paris on a glorious and auspicious moment of 21st February 1878. The Mother said, "Since the beginning of the earth, wherever and whenever there was the possibility of manifesting a ray of consciousness, I was there." She said, "I have never left the earth since it was formed." Explaining the significance of Sri Aurobindo's birth, the Mother said that his birth was eternal in the history of the universe, and spiritually, it was the birth of the eternal upon earth. These two significant births, one in the east and the other in the west, were the two great and direct manifestations of the Supreme to change the very course of man's destiny upon earth, bridging the gulf between man's mind and God's. The meeting of these two incarnations, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, on the physical plane, was predestined to fulfill their mission. Sri Aurobindo and the Mother shaped their lives amidst different cultural milieus and ethos, and grew up preparing for the great work of transformation of human life to a life divine.
Sri Aurobindo was the son of Dr. Krishnadhan Ghosh and Swarnalata Devi. Dr. Ghosh was a brilliant and well-known surgeon of Calcutta. Steeped in the spirit of Anglicism, he tried to keep his children away from all Indian culture and influence right from their childhood. Loreto Convent School, Darjeeling. This school was intended for the wards of British administrators in India and run by Irish nuns. Dr. Ghosh sent Sri Aurobindo at the age of 4 with his 2 elder brothers for their education in this school located in the shadow of the great Himalayas. In 1879, Dr. Ghosh took Sri Aurobindo, who was then only 7 years old, and his 2 elder brothers to England for their education. The children were brought up there in an English family at Manchester.
The mother was born into a unique family. Her mother, Mathilde Ismaloun, was from Egypt and said to be a descendant of the Egyptian pharaohs. Her father, Maurice Alfassa, was from Turkey, dedicated to Islamic faith, and he was a banker. Just a year before the mother's birth, her parents moved from Egypt to Paris. Though born into such a family of mixed race and religion and nationality, the mother declared later, "I belong to no nation, no civilization, no society, no race, but to the divine."
In 1884, Sri Aurobindo was admitted to St. Paul's School, London. As a foundation scholar, he was regarded as the elite of the school. During the last 2 years at St. Paul's, Sri Aurobindo was forced to live almost on a starvation diet, as his father's remittances had stopped completely. However, these hardships did not in any way prevent Sri Aurobindo from passing the final examination with flying colours. In 1890, Sri Aurobindo went to King's College, Cambridge, with a senior classical scholarship. There he studied for 2 years and passed the Tripos in Cambridge in the first division. Sri Aurobindo's education in England gave him a wide introduction to the culture of ancient, medieval, and modern Europe. He had mastered Greek and Latin, English and French, and had also acquired some familiarity with continental languages like German and Italian. Sri Aurobindo passed the open competition for the Indian Civil Service in 1890. After 2 years of probation, he passed the final examination for the service in 1892 and obtained record marks in Greek and Latin. However, he felt no attraction towards the Indian Civil Service and was seeking some way to escape from that bondage. By certain maneuvers, he managed to get himself disqualified for the riding test without himself rejecting the service, which his father would not have allowed him to do. At the age of 11, Sri Aurobindo had already received strongly the impression that a period of general upheaval and great evolutionary change was coming into the world, and he himself was destined to play a part in it. But the firm decision took full shape only towards the end of another 4 years. It had already been made when he went to Cambridge. While at Cambridge, Sri Aurobindo became a member and for some time the secretary of the Indian Majlis and delivered several revolutionary speeches championing Indian nationalism. In London, he became a member of a secret society called Lotus and Dagger, in which each member took a vow to work for the liberation of India.
Sri Aurobindo had no significant spiritual experiences during his long stay in England, except 2 glimpses of his inner life. The first one was when he was 12 or 13 years of age. He felt that he ought to give up selfishness. The experience, however small, was a turning point in his life. The second experience came just before he left England. It was his first pre-yogic experience, the mental experience of the Atman.
12th January 1893, Royal Albert Docks in London. Sri Aurobindo set sail homeward after staying in England for 14 years, the formative period of his life. While leaving England, Sri Aurobindo recounted a significant inner experience he had during his brief stay of 2 years in Darjeeling. I was lying down one day when I saw suddenly a grey darkness rushing into me and enveloping me and the whole of the universe. After that, I had a great tamas, darkness always hanging on to me all along my stay in England. It left me only when I was coming back to India. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, there was no such regret in leaving England, no attachment to the past or misgivings for the future. If there was attachment to a European land as a second country, it was intellectually and emotionally to one not seen or lived in this life, not England, but France.
While Sri Aurobindo was in England, the mother was growing up spiritually in France to fulfill the mission of her life. The mother said, when I was 5, even 3 years old, I was conscious. The beginning was made in the womb. From the age of 5, I was conscious that I did not belong to this world, that I did not have a human consciousness. Sri Aurobindo wrote, it is a manifestation that takes place, a manifestation of a growing divine consciousness, not human turning into divine. The mother was inwardly above the human, even in childhood. Around the age of 5, the mother used to feel a light and force above her head, penetrate her brain, and gradually shape her life. Her sadhana began at that age. The mother did not have any formal education until the age of 7. In due course, she learned and assimilated the skills of reading and writing, painting, music, and occultism, almost simultaneously. The mother was generally at the top of her class in all subjects, and on finishing her school, she received prix d'honneur.
The mother's love for nature and its intrinsic beauty was unbound. She used to take solitary walks in the forest since she was 8 years old. All nature dumbly calls to her alone, to heal with her feet the aching throb of life. The mother visited the Black Forest in Germany, where she loved watching gnomes at play. At the age of 12, she used to meditate in Fontainebleau in the company of little birds and animals. She could not only identify herself with plants, but also with animals, and communicate with them. For the mother, the inner and the outer worlds were fused at this age.
Gradually, as she grew up, the mother began to feel that she had to do some tremendously great work that nobody yet knew. She said that she was as though born with the knowledge of the mission she was to fulfill on earth. The mother wrote, "When I was a child of about 13, for nearly a year every night, as soon as I had gone to bed, it seemed to me that I went out of my body and rose straight up above the house, then above the city, very high above. Then I used to see myself clad in a magnificent golden robe, much longer than myself. And as I rose higher, the robe would stretch, spreading out in a circle around me, to form a kind of immense roof over the city. Then I would see men, women, children, old men, the sick, the unfortunate, coming out from every side. They would gather under the outspread robe, begging for help, telling of their miseries, their suffering, their hardships. In reply, the robe, supple and alive, would extend towards each one of them individually, and as soon as they had touched it, they were comforted or healed."
The mother not only explored the occult worlds, but also the subliminal worlds. The mother said, "Between 11 and 13, a series of psychic and spiritual experiences revealed to me not only the existence of God, but man's possibility of uniting with Him, of realizing Him integrally in consciousness and action, of manifesting Him upon earth in a life divine. This, along with a practical discipline for its fulfillment, was given to me during my body's sleep by several teachers, some of whom I met afterwards on the physical plane. Later on, as the interior and exterior development proceeded, the spiritual and psychic relation with one of these beings became more and more clear and frequent. I was led to call him Krishna, and henceforth I was aware that it was with him that the divine work was to be done.
Sri Aurobindo reached India on 6th February 1893. As he set foot on Indian soil at Apollo Bandar in Bombay, he had a significant inner experience. He was uplifted by an unsolicited spiritual grace. A vast calm descended upon him. This calm surrounded him and remained for long months afterwards. It was as if Mother India was embracing him in welcome and in anticipation that his return presaged her liberation from the shackles of bondage to foreign rule, so that the sun of India's destiny would rise and fill India with its light, and overflow India, and overflow Asia, and overflow the world.
When Sri Aurobindo was disqualified for Indian civil service, the Gaikwar of Baroda, His Highness Sri Sajirao, was in London. Sri Aurobindo saw him and obtained an appointment in the Baroda service. After his return from England, Sri Aurobindo joined Baroda State Service on 18th February 1893. He spent 13 years from 1893 to 1906 in the Baroda service, first in the Revenue Department and in secretariat work for the Maharaja. Afterwards, he worked as professor of English and finally the vice principal in the Baroda College.
In England, Sri Aurobindo received, according to his father's express instructions, an entirely Occidental education, without any contact with the culture of India and the East. At Baroda, he made up the deficiency, learned Sanskrit and several modern Indian languages, assimilated the spirit of Indian civilization and its forms, past and present. For Sri Aurobindo, these were the years of self-culture, of literary activity, and of preparation for his future work. Sri Aurobindo wrote, "While others look upon their country as an inert piece of matter, a few meadows and fields, forests and hills and rivers, I look upon my country as the mother." He began soon after coming to India to write on political matters, trying to awaken the nation to the ideas of the future. In those articles, he called for a dynamic leadership based upon self-help and fearlessness.
In 1902, Sri Aurobindo met Lokmanya Tilak at the Ahmedabad session of the Congress. Tilak seemed to him one possible leader for a revolutionary party. In 1905, the Swadeshi movement was started by Sri Aurobindo with other leaders of similar political inclination and came forward publicly as an all-India party called the Nationalist Party with a definite challenging program to liberate Mother India from foreign rule, putting Tilak at its head. The Nationalist Party adopted the principle and the new policy of self-help. It aimed on one side an effective organization of forces of the nation, and on the other professed a complete non-cooperation with the government. Sri Aurobindo started active political work in Bengal, taking privileged leave from the Baroda service in 1906. The outbreak of the agitation against the partition of Bengal in 1905 and the brutal police atrocities in Borishal Conference in April 1906 gave him the opportunity to give up the Baroda service and join openly the political movement. Sri Aurobindo finally left the Baroda service on 18th June 1906 and went to Calcutta as the principal of the newly founded Bengal National College.
For the mother, her sole objective was the search for God and spiritual realization in all things. The mother said, "Between the age of 18 and 20, I had attained a conscious and constant union with the Divine Presence, and that I had done it all alone, with absolutely nobody to help me, not even books." Later, she came upon Vivekananda's book on Raj Yoga. The mother said, This made me gain in a few months what would have perhaps taken me years to do. Reading the Gita in 1 month, the mother was able to enter into its spirit and find the divine, the God within.
Tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapsyasi shashvatam.
Meanwhile, in Baroda, Sri Aurobindo also had a few spiritual experiences and realizations. In 1893, he had vision of the Godhead surging up from within him when he was in danger of a carriage accident. In 1903, while walking on the ridge of the Takht-e-Suleiman in Kashmir, he had the realization of the vacant infinite. Sri Aurobindo experienced the living presence of Kali in the temple of Mahakali on the northern bank of Narmada near Karnali. He wrote, "A face that looks into yours, an inner sight in you has regarded the world mother." When Sri Aurobindo turned to the yoga and resolved to practice it, he prayed fervently, "If thou art, then thou knowest my heart. Thou knowest that I do not ask for mukti. I do not ask for anything which others ask for. I ask only for strength to uplift this nation. I ask only to be allowed to live and work for this people whom I love and to whom I pray that I may devote my life." For him, there was no conflict or wavering between yoga and politics. When he started yoga, he carried on both without any idea of opposition between them. On coming to Calcutta, Sri Aurobindo plunged into active politics with the avowed aim of liberating Mother India from British rule. Vande Mataram, the newly founded recognized organ of the Nationalist Party, was launched on 6th August 1906, of which Sri Aurobindo was at that time the joint editor. Sri Aurobindo openly advocated complete and absolute independence as the aim of political action in India. Sri Aurobindo declared in the Vande Mataram, "One thing only we are sure of, and one thing we wear as a life belt, which will buoy us up on the waves of the chaos that is coming on the land. Swaraj is the life belt, Swaraj the pilot, Swaraj the star of guidance." Wrote Sri Aurobindo, "India is the guru of the nations, the physician of the human soul in its profounder maladies. She is destined once more to new mold the life of the world and restore the peace of the human spirit. But Swaraj is the necessary condition of her work, and before she can do the work, she must fulfill the condition." All that Sri Aurobindo had said in the pages of the journal formed the gospel of the immense political upheaval that led India to the attainment of its ultimate independence. A new spirit pervaded the country. In the surge of enthusiasm and pride that was instilled by the cries of Vande Mataram ringing loud everywhere, the people of India joined each other to dare and act together and hope. In the thoughts and feelings of the countrymen, Sri Aurobindo was in the strictest sense of the term a true prophet, pathfinder and pioneer of India's freedom movement. Sri Aurobindo's zeal to awaken India with a clarion call of Bande Mataram attracted the ire of the British rulers. The government was seeking an opportunity to apprehend Sri Aurobindo and restrain him from continuing his nationalist activities. On 16th August 1907, a warrant was issued against Sri Aurobindo. In response, Sri Aurobindo went to the police station and offered himself for arrest, but he was soon acquitted for lack of evidence. Sri Aurobindo became the leader of the Nationalist Party in Bengal. In Baroda, students put Sri Aurobindo on a carriage and pulled it for some distance, with crowds holding flags and shouting national cries.
While Sri Aurobindo got himself actively involved in politics, the mother involved herself in occultism. The mother visited Tlemcen in Algeria twice, once in July 1906 and then again in July 1907 to practice occultism. On each occasion, she stayed in Algeria for a brief period of 3 months with Max Théon and his wife, Alma Théon. Exceptionally proficient in occultism, Max Théon had received initiation in India. He knew a little Sanskrit and was thoroughly versed in the Rig Veda. His wife, Alma Théon, was an occultist of great powers. The mother learnt well how to go in and out of the supraphysical world at will from Alma Théon. She also learnt the science of materialization, dematerialization, and exteriorization.
In the midst of political turmoil, Sri Aurobindo's inner work seemed to have come to an impasse. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, I was groping for a way, doing no sadhana at all, making no effort, because I didn't know what effort to make, all having failed. I had a complete arrest and was at a loss. He expressed a wish to see a yogi. A meeting with Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, a Maratha yogi, was arranged in January 1908. Sri Aurobindo's first requisition was to do yoga, but for work, for action, not for sannyasa and nirvana. Lele instructed him how to reach complete silence of the mind and immobility of the whole consciousness. Sri Aurobindo remained with Lele for 3 days in Baroda. In 3 days, really in 1, his mind became full of eternal silence, with the result of lasting and massive spiritual realizations, opening to him the larger ways of yoga. Lele finally told Sri Aurobindo to put himself entirely in the hands of the divine within and move only as he was moved. And then he would need no instruction either from Lele or anyone else. In the state of an ineffable silence of the mind, Sri Aurobindo was made to speak in different parts of India on the theme of God being the leader of the manifold Renaissance in India, and on her mission of giving the spiritual light to humanity. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, The force made the body do the work without any inner activity.
On 30th April 1908, a bomb exploded in Muzaffarpur, killing 2 European ladies. The government implicated Sri Aurobindo in terrorist activities. Sri Aurobindo was arrested from his residence at Calcutta on 2nd May 1908. Along with Sri Aurobindo, other members of the group were arrested on a charge of conspiracy to wage war against the British government. Sri Aurobindo said, "When I was arrested and hurried to the Lal Bazar Hazrat, I was shaken in faith for a while, for I could not look into the heart of his intention. Therefore, I faltered for a moment and cried out in my heart to him, 'What is this that has happened to me?' I believed that I had a mission to work for the people of my country, and until that work was done, I should have thy protection. Why then am I here on such a charge?" A day passed, and a second day, and a third, when a voice came to me from within, "Wait and see." Then I grew calm and waited.
On 5th May 1908, Sri Aurobindo was taken to Alipore jail and was kept there as an under trial prisoner, mostly in a solitary cell. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, "There I waited day and night for the voice of God within me, to know what He had to say to me, to learn what I had to do. In this seclusion, the earliest realization, the first lesson came to me. It seemed to me that He spoke to me again and said, 'The bonds you had not the strength to break, I have broken for you, because it is not my will, nor was it ever my intention that should continue. I have had another thing for you to do, and it is for that I have brought you here, to teach you what you could not learn for yourself and to train you for my work.'" Then he placed the Gita in my hands.
Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana.
His strength entered into me, and I was able to do the sadhana of the Gita. In jail, Sri Aurobindo spent almost all his time in reading the Gita and the Upanishads, and in intensive meditation and practice of yoga. Sri Aurobindo realized the spirit of the Gita and practiced it for his sadhana. Sri Aurobindo had the direct vision and realization of Vasudeva, the Narayana, the Krishna in everything and everywhere while he was in confinement. Sri Aurobindo said, "It was Narayana who was guarding and standing sentry over me. He felt the arms of Sri Krishna around him, the arms of his friend and lover." In the seclusion of the jail, in communion of yoga, 2 messages came to Sri Aurobindo. The first message said, "I have given you a work, and it is to help to uplift this nation." The second message said, "When you go forth, speak to your nation always this word, that it is for the Sanatana Dharma that they arise. It is for the world and not for themselves that they arise. Wrote Sri Aurobindo. I was hearing constantly the voice of Vivekananda speaking to me for a fortnight in the jail in my solitary meditation, and felt his presence. The voice spoke only on a special and limited but very important field of spiritual experience, and it ceased as soon as it had finished saying all it had to say on that subject.
When the trial opened in the session court, Chittaranjan Das, the renowned lawyer, appeared as the defense counsel. Sri Aurobindo said, "When I saw him, I was satisfied, but I still thought it necessary to write instructions. Then all that was put away from me, and I had the message from within. This is the man who will save you from the snares put around your feet. Put aside those papers. It is not you who will instruct him. I will instruct him." From that time, I did not of myself speak a word to my counsel about the case or give a single instruction. The prosecution, despite its best efforts, could not find enough evidence against Sri Aurobindo. The defense, ably piloted by Chittaranjan Das, masterfully demolished each and every charge brought against Sri Aurobindo. In this historic trial of fighters for India's emancipation, referring to Sri Aurobindo, Chittaranjan Das said to the judge, "He will be looked upon as the poet of patriotism, as the prophet of nationalism and lover of humanity. His words will be echoed and re-echoed, not only in India, but across distant seas and lands. Therefore, I say that the man in his position is not only standing before the bar of this court, but before the bar of the High Court of history. Sri Aurobindo was acquitted on 6th May 1909. Sri Aurobindo considered his imprisonment in Alipur jail as a year of living in a forest, in an ashram or a hermitage. May 1st, 1908, recounted Sri Aurobindo, "I did not know that that day would mean the end of a chapter of my life. When I would re-enter the world of activity, it would not be the old familiar Aurobindo Ghosh. Rather, it would be a new man, with a new character, a new intellect, a new life, and a new mind embarking upon a new course of action that would come out of the ashram at Alipur."
Sri Aurobindo declared in 1909, "The nation and humanity will be animated by a new consciousness. New thought and new efforts will be made to reach new ends. Amidst these revolutionary changes, India will become free." He said, "Spirituality is India's only politics, the fulfillment of Sanatana Dharma, its only Swaraj." Wrote Sri Aurobindo, "Each nation is a Shakti or power of the evolving spirit of humanity and lives by the principle it embodies. India is the Bharat Shakti, the living energy of a great spiritual conception, and fidelity to it is the very principle of our existence. For by its virtue alone she has been one of the immortal nations. This alone has been the secret of her amazing persistence and perpetual force of survival and revival. Sri Aurobindo, one night at the Karma Yogin office, received information of the government's intention to arrest him. He received a sudden command from within to go to Chandanagar in French India. He obeyed the command at once and in 10 minutes was at the river Ghat and in a boat plying on the Ganges. In a few hours, he was at Chandanagar, where he went into secret residence. At Chandanagar, he plunged entirely into solitary meditation and ceased all other activity. Sri Aurobindo again received an inner command at Chandanagar to proceed to Pondicherry, then under French occupation. Soon he returned to Calcutta and boarded the steamship Dupleix on 1st April 1910 on his destined voyage to Pondicherry. On 4th April 1910, Sri Aurobindo landed at Pondicherry and was taken to Shankar Chettiar's house. On the day of his arrival at Pondicherry, a third case of sedition was launched against Sri Aurobindo for his article, To My Countrymen, published in the Karma Yogin on 25th December 1909. This case also failed on appeal in the Calcutta High Court. The British authorities persisted in their efforts to prosecute Sri Aurobindo at Pondicherry, but could not succeed. At Pondicherry, Sri Aurobindo and the young pioneers for his work around him shifted from one house to another several times on account of continued financial stringency and other prevailing circumstances. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, I need some place of refuge in which I can complete my yoga unassailed and build up other souls around me. It seems to me that Pondicherry is the place appointed by those who are beyond. Sri Aurobindo continued to stay at Pondicherry for the practice of his yoga and lived there for the rest of his life. Wrote Sri Aurobindo, Pondicherry is my place of retreat, my cave of tapasya, not of the ascetic kind, but of a brand of my own invention. Pondicherry emerged as the abode of Sri Aurobindo's tapasya to explore the possibility of man becoming divine by bringing down a higher force that will manifest upon earth. There are in the history of the earth moments of transition when things that have existed for thousands of years must give way to those that are about to manifest.
Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma mritam gamaya Om Shanti Shanti
The period from 1908 to 1914 was for the mother a period of intensive mental development, leading to the realization of something luminous and true beyond the synthesis of all mental knowledge. The mother had a unique experience of the mantra Om in 1912. She explained that particular sound holds the vibration of thousands upon thousands of years of spiritual aspiration. Man's aspiration to the Supreme is there in its entirety. That Om is the totality of the sounds of creation perceived by the Supreme. He hears Om like a call to him. As explained by Sri Aurobindo, Om is the mantra, the expressive sound symbol of the Brahman consciousness. All word and thought are an outflowering of the great Om. During these years of the mother's intensive yogic discipline, she recorded in her diary the conversations she so often had with the Supreme Lord. In her first diary note, published in this book, the mother records on 2nd November 1912, "I aspire for the day when I can no longer say, I, for I shall be thou." In a blessed hour within the realms of eternity, the mother left Paris on 4th March 1914. Her direction was Pondicherry in French India. Her destination, Sri Aurobindo. Her prayer, "Grant that I may accomplish my mission, that I may help in thy integral manifestation." 29th March 1914, the mother reached Pondicherry, the destined place of a meeting with Sri Aurobindo. House number 41, known as the guest house on Rue François Martin, where Sri Aurobindo was staying. The mother met Sri Aurobindo for the first time on the same day of her arrival at Pondicherry. She climbed up the stairs to the veranda of the guest house where Sri Aurobindo was waiting for her. Here first she met on the uncertain earth the one for whom her heart had come so far. A moment passed that was eternity's ray. An hour began the matrix of new time.
In this divine moment, the earth sings a hymn of gladness. The grasses shudder with pleasure. The air is vibrant with light. The trees lift towards heaven their most ardent prayer. The chant of birds becomes a canticle, and the waves of the sea billow with love on this glorious day.
The mother described, "As soon as I saw Sri Aurobindo, I recognized in him the well-known being whom I used to call Krishna. And this is enough to explain why I am fully convinced that my place and my work are near him in India. Sri Aurobindo confirmed. In the mother's childhood visions, she saw myself whom she knew as Krishna. When I saw Sri Aurobindo, recollected the mother, I at once knew that it was he, the divine, and I wholly surrendered myself to him. My whole being gave the consent. Sri Aurobindo, after seeing the mother, remarked, I had never seen anywhere a self-surrender so absolute and unreserved. The day after the meeting, on 30th March 1914, the mother noted in her diary, "It matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. He whom we saw yesterday is on earth. His presence is enough to prove that a day will come when darkness shall be transformed into light, and thy reign shall be indeed established upon earth." On April 1st, 1914, the mother records in her diary, "All the past in its external form seems ridiculously arbitrary to me, and yet I know it was useful in its own time. But now all is changed and a new stage has begun."
The meeting of Sri Aurobindo and the mother on that fateful day of 29th March 1914 was the harbinger of the glorious new chapter in the unfolding process of the self and a momentous turning point in Earth's destiny. The incarnate dual powers shall open God's door, eternal supermind touch earthly time. On June 14th, 1914, the mother records, "In us must take place the union of the two wills and the two currents, so that from their contact may spring forth the illuminating spark. In a new act of the drama of the world, the united two began a greater age. The foundation for the joint work to be done for the humanity by the dual incarnations, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, was laid after their meeting at Pondicherry in March 1914. The decision to publish Arya, a monthly philosophical review, was the first step of this divine collaboration. The mother was assigned to look after fully the French counterpart of Arya, called Revue de la Grande Synthèse Philosophique.
While preparations were afoot to launch the Arya, the First World War broke out on August 4th, 1914. The Arya was launched on 15th August 1914, the birthday of Sri Aurobindo, amidst the devastating passage of Earth's travail. The Arya was like the divine sowing. The mother records in her diary on 31st August 1914, "Peace, peace in all the world. War is an appearance, turmoil is an illusion. Peace is there immutable peace. Mother, sweet mother who I am, thou art at once the destroyer and the builder.
Devi Prabannarti Hare Prasida.
And thou livest in thy immensity, in the least of its atoms.
Prasida Vishweshwari Pahi Vishwam Tvamishwari Devi Characharasya.
The mother said, it was in 1914 that the identification with the Universal Mother took place. The identification of the physical consciousness with her. Of course, I knew before this that I was the mother, but the complete identification took place only in 1914.
The mother was constrained to leave for France because of wartime regulations imposed by the French government. The mother said, in 1915, I had to go away, but I left my psychic being with him. She was sure of being called to a new and vaster realization. After the mother's departure from Pondicherry, the French version of Arya was discontinued, but as an immortal work, the Arya was kept alive by Sri Aurobindo till January 1921. Sri Aurobindo said, "My business is now not man-making, but divine man-making. In the Arya, I stayed the thought upon which this new evolution will be based as I see it, and the method of yoga by which it can be accomplished. My whole message is there."
In early 1916, the mother set sail for Japan. It was for the mother an invitation to the country of the rising sun, a new horizon. The mother appreciated Japan's unfailing beauty of nature. She records in her diary note of 1st April 1917, "Thou hast shown to my mute and expectant soul all the splendor of fairy landscapes, trees at festival, and lonely paths that seem to scale the sky. Once more, everywhere I see cherry trees. Thou hast put a magical power in these flowers. They seem to speak of thy sole presence. They bring with them the smile of the divine." On 7th April 1917, her diary recordings speak, "A deep concentration seized on me, and I perceived that I was identifying myself with a single cherry blossom. Then through it, with all cherry blossoms. And as I descended deeper in the consciousness, following a stream of bluish force, I became suddenly the cherry tree itself, stretching towards the sky like so many arms, its innumerable branches laden with their sacrifice of flowers. Then I heard distinctly this sentence: Thus hast thou made thyself one with the soul of the cherry trees, and so thou canst take note that it is the divine who makes the offering of this flower prayer to heaven. When I had written it, all was effaced. But now the blood of the cherry tree flows in my veins, and with it flows an incomparable peace and force. The mother visited several places in Japan and traveled to many places of pilgrimage for Buddhists. The mother visited the Daionji temple at Sarasina. She made pencil drawings and 2 oil paintings of the temple, as well as a scroll recording the visit. About her stay in Japan, the mother said that for 4 years she lived in Japan from wonder to wonder.
In Pondicherry, during the period between 1915 and 1920, Sri Aurobindo's sadhana was, however, sitting on the path. Sri Aurobindo wrote, "Heaven we have possessed, but not the earth. But the fullness of the yoga is to make, in the formula of the Veda, heaven and earth equal and one." He said, sadhana and the work were waiting for the mother's coming.
March 1920. The mother set sail for Pondicherry, the chosen place of her sadhana and work in collaboration with Sri Aurobindo. After 6 years of Sri Aurobindo's silent tapasya at Pondicherry, the mother returned from Japan to share his kingdom and work by his side. On this momentous journey, earth felt the imperishable's passage close. The waking ear of nature heard her steps, and wideness turned to her its limitless eye, and scattered on sealed depths her luminous smile, kindled to fire the silence of the worlds. The mother described, "I was on the boat when all of a sudden, abruptly, about 2 nautical miles from Pondicherry, the quality, I may even say the physical quality of the atmosphere, of the air, changed so much that I knew we were entering the aura of Sri Aurobindo." On 24th April 1920, the mother reached Pondicherry. For the rest of her life, she never left Pondicherry, working there as Sri Aurobindo's force, to manifest in its plenitude what he wanted to achieve. One had returned from the transcendent plains and bore anew the load of mortal breath, who had striven of old with our darkness and our pain. She took again her divine and unfinished task, survivor of death and the Ionic years. Once more with her fathomless heart, she fronted time.
Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु मातृरूपेण संस्थिता
The Mother, love incarnate, the consciousness of the Supreme, the Divine Presence, has spread everywhere on the earth.
In Pondicherry, the mothers stayed in different houses during different periods. She used to regularly interact with Sri Aurobindo. The spiritual interaction between the mother and Sri Aurobindo was the kernel of their collaborative sadhana and work and their divine mission on earth. Sri Aurobindo wrote, "I began my yoga in 1904 without a guru. In 1908, I received important help from a Maratha yogi and discovered the foundation of my sadhana. But from that time till the mother came to India, I received no spiritual help from anyone else." Sri Aurobindo said, without the mother, his conception of a divine life on earth could never have been embodied. She is the golden bridge, the wonderful fire, the luminous heart of the unknown is she, a power of silence in the depths of God, the might of all that never yet came down. Once seen, his heart acknowledged only her.
In November 1920, a great tempest hit Pondicherry. The Bayud house, where the mother lived, started leaking badly and seemed to be in danger of collapsing. Sri Aurobindo did not allow the mother to stay in the house any longer. The mother then moved to the house where Sri Aurobindo lived. Since then, she always remained in the same house where Sri Aurobindo was staying.
The mother installed Sri Aurobindo on the high pedestal of Master and Lord of Yoga. Previously, Sri Aurobindo was looked upon as a friend, comrade, and leader. But the mother taught the inmates what it was to be the disciple of a guru, how they were to condition their mind and soul to receive his grace. It was the mother who opened their eyes. In October 1922, Sri Aurobindo and the mother moved to 9 Rue de la Marine, later known as the Library House, which is the southwest section of the present main building of the ashram.
It was the hour of a luminous dusk on 24th November 1926. On that day, a significant spiritual event happened. The mother knew that a momentous descent of light had taken place. The disciples were called by her to gather in the veranda, the usual place of meditation, by 6 o'clock. After the disciples had assembled in the veranda, the mother and Sri Aurobindo joined them. There was a deep silence. Silence absolute, living silence, not merely living, but overflowing with divinity. Many saw an oceanic flood of light rushing down from above. Everyone felt a kind of pressure above his head. The whole atmosphere was surcharged. Expectation rose in a flood. The meditation lasted for about 45 minutes. Thereafter, the disciples were blessed by Sri Aurobindo and the mother.
Explaining the significance of this day's event, Sri Aurobindo said, 24th November 1926 was the descent of Krishna into the physical. Krishna is not the supramental light. The descent of Krishna would mean the descent of the overmind Godhead preparing, though not itself actually, the descent of supermind and Ananda. This day is observed in the ashram as the Siddhi Day. Later, the mother said, the 24th November is called the Day of Victory in remembrance of a very important spiritual event which took place in 1926.
On 24th November 1926, Sri Aurobindo Ashram was born, with a group formed naturally and spontaneously, having the same aspiration to march together towards the same goal. Describing the character of this ashram, Sri Aurobindo wrote, "This ashram has been created with another object than that ordinarily common to such institutions, not for the renunciation of the world, but as a center and a field of practice for the evolution of another kind and form of life, which would in the final end be moved by a higher spiritual consciousness and embody a greater life of the spirit."
24th November 1926 onwards, Sri Aurobindo put the mother in charge of all the outer work, as he wanted to withdraw into concentration in order to hasten the manifestation of the supramental consciousness. Indeed, Sri Aurobindo needed the relief to be able to concentrate on his work of bringing the higher light into the lowest levels of matter. In February 1927, Sri Aurobindo and the mother moved to the house on Rue François Martin, the northeast section of the present ashram block, known as the Meditation House, where they remain for the rest of their lives upon earth. The first floor apartment consists of two main blocks used by the mother and Sri Aurobindo. One block has two rooms used by the mother. They are called Salon and Green Room. A golden curtain with 5 dragons in embroidery was at times hung behind her divan in the salon. The significance of the golden curtain with dragons, as the mother has said, are symbols of 5 spirits in the creation, representing 5 elements of life, namely earth, water, fire, air and space. The other block in the first floor apartment has mainly 3 rooms used by Sri Aurobindo. This block also includes the darshan room. The meditation hall is below this block on the ground floor.
To establish the truth of the Mother's embodiment, on 21st February 1927, the Mother's birthday, Sri Aurobindo gave the message. There are 2 powers that alone can effect in their conjunction the great and difficult thing which is the aim of our endeavor. A fixed and unfailing aspiration that calls from below, and a supreme grace from above that answers. Significantly and subsequently, the description of the Mother by Sri Aurobindo was published as a booklet titled The Mother in 1928, with the Mother's symbol on it.
About the significance of a symbol, the Mother wrote, "The central circle represents the divine consciousness. The 4 petals represent the 4 powers of the Mother. The 12 petals represent the 12 powers of the Mother manifested for her work." The Mother's symbol could also be seen as the symbolic design of the white lotus of supreme consciousness, with the Mahashakti at the center in her 4 aspects and 12 attributes.
On the significance of Sri Aurobindo's symbol, the Mother wrote, "The descending triangle represents Sat, Chit, Ananda. The ascending triangle represents the aspiring answer from matter under the form of life, light, and love. The junction of both, the central square, is the perfect manifestation having at its center the avatar of the Supreme, the lotus. The water inside the square represents the multiplicity, the creation. Later, the Mother said, "It may be taken that the lotus and the water inside the square represent the supramental manifestation that will bring unity in diversity, which has been the craving of the world from time immemorial."
Describing her different aspects, Sri Aurobindo wrote, "4 great aspects of the Mother, 4 of her leading powers and personalities have stood in front in her guidance of this universe and in her dealings with the terrestrial plane. To the 4 we give the 4 great names: Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati. Imperial Maheshwari is seated in the wideness above the thinking mind and will, and sublimates and greatens them into wisdom and largeness, or floods with a splendor beyond them. Mahakali is of another nature, not wideness but height, not wisdom but force and strength are her peculiar power. wisdom and force are not the only manifestations of the Supreme Mother. There is a subtler mystery of her nature, and without it, wisdom and force would be incomplete things, and without it, perfection would not be perfect. This is the power of Mahalakshmi, and there is no aspect of the divine Shakti more attractive to the heart of embodied beings. Mahasaraswati is the mother's power of work and her spirit of perfection and order. Sri Aurobindo wrote, "The one whom we adore as the Mother is the divine conscious force that dominates all existence. One, and yet so many-sided, that to follow her movement is impossible even for the quickest mind and for the freest and most vast intelligence. The Mother is the consciousness and force of the Supreme, and far above all she creates." When Sri Aurobindo was asked, "Do you not refer to the Mother, our Mother, in your book, The Mother?" Sri Aurobindo's reply was, "Yes."
Being asked if he is divine incarnation, Sri Aurobindo said, "Follow your faith. It is not likely to mislead you." The Mother said, "The divine is what you adore in Sri Aurobindo." Sri Aurobindo has brought to the world the assurance of a divine future. The Mother said,
What Sri Aurobindo represents in the history of the Earth's spiritual progress is not a teaching, not even a revelation. It is a mighty action straight from the Supreme.
Speaking on herself, the Mother said, "There is only one thing of which I am absolutely sure, and that is who I am." Sri Aurobindo also knew it and declared it. Even the doubt of the whole humanity would change nothing to this fact.
Sri Aurobindo said, "The Mother's consciousness and mine are the same, to one divine consciousness in two, because that is necessary for the play. Nothing can be done without her knowledge and force, without her consciousness. Mother and I are one, but in two bodies."
Said the Mother, "Without him I exist not. Without me he is unmanifest." This unique spiritual bonding between the two incarnations upon earth was the foundation for the work of the supramental manifestation.
The creation of the ashram for a divine life upon earth was not only a step towards fulfilling Sri Aurobindo's mission, but it was also a fulfillment of the Mother's own dream. The Mother worked out with extraordinary precision a small world in the ashram for the fulfillment of her dream. Different services were created, not by any artificial planning, but by living and dynamic needs of the ashram and its inmates. As the number of inmates increased, the new dining room was opened in 1934. For each inmate, the mother chose a specific work, molding each one's life towards a God-oriented existence. To each, she gave the work that would be best for his sadhana, and at the same time ensure his or her inner progress. It was clear from the beginning that the work in the ashram was meant as a service to the divine and as a field for the inner opening to the divine, surrender to the divine alone, rejection of ego, and all the ordinary vital movements and training in a psychic elevation, selflessness, obedience, renunciation of all mental, vital, or other self-assertion of the limited personality. Sri Aurobindo wrote, "I have made for all the disciples, without exception, that they should receive the light and force from her, and not directly from me, and be guided by the Mother in their spiritual progress." Sri Aurobindo declared, "Whatever one gets from the Mother comes from myself also. There is no difference. So too, if I give anything, it is by the Mother's force that it goes to the sadhak." To quote Sri Aurobindo, "Meditation and work and bhakti, each in its place, make up the foundation of sadhana."
The spirit of work as worship prevailed in all works, and the Mother encouraged all types of self-expression. To those who occupied themselves with music, the Mother said, "Through your music, bhakti and aspiration can grow and prepare the nature for realization." The Mother herself used to play the organ. She had had a deep interest in music ever since her childhood and started playing the piano at the age of 10. About her own music, she said, "Her music aims at awakening certain profound feelings. To hear it, one should make oneself as silent and passive as possible." To those who wanted to express themselves through art, the Mother said, "Develop your inner being, find your soul, and at the same time you will find the true artistic expression." Her encouragement to the artists led to exhibitions of paintings with great success. The Mother started painting at the age of 8 and began doing oil paintings from the age of 10. At the age of 15, she joined a studio to learn drawing and painting. She involved herself seriously in painting and became an accomplished artist with her training at one of the most reputed art academies in Paris at the age of 20. The Mother herself took up painting once again. She drew a self-portrait and one of Sri Aurobindo. She also did sketches of many ashram inmates, catching them in different moods and poses.
The material growth and experience of spiritual consciousness seem to have been progressing hand in hand paving the way for a smooth running of the ashram to achieve the goal as envisaged by the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. The ashram had become the cradle of a new world, of the creation of tomorrow.